This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of business and technology leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show.
Oh yeah, this is the biggest disruptor we've had in 100 years in education. You might be able to say that for other industries too, but particularly for education. We went through, you went through calculators coming out. Oh, we want to use calculators for math and it's going to ruin everything. And we figured out how to deal with that. And then you had the rise of the internet and, people are going to just go to Google. They're going to Google everything to write their papers with. And we figured out how to get through that. And now we have AI. And I think LLMs are, a calculator of human language. And we've not dealt with that before.
CXO Secrets is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences, and insights at edsxevents.com. Eric Upchurch, Chief Technology Officer at Fort Worth Independent Schools District. Thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
My pleasure.
And whereabouts are you joining us from today? And what has your work week or perhaps your work term look like so far?
Well, we're late in the week. We're going fast here in the school district. Right now, we're finishing up state testing. So that's been the big thing for the last month. All of our standardized testings that we do here in Texas. So Fort Worth is part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, kind of in the north part of Texas. And we have a Dallas-Fort Worth. The population of this Metroplex is larger than, I think, all but like 5 or 6 states. So
wow.
We have many millions of people here. Fort Worth ISD serves nearly 70,000 students.
Gosh, that's extraordinary. I mean, we'll come on to the scale of the operation and how that fits into your responsibility in a moment. But just to, I guess, kind of chart a course, what our agenda is for today, I'd like to explore with you some of the unique challenges and opportunities, of course, of technology leadership in education. And I'm really keen to understand what it is that makes leadership in your area in technology leadership in education distinct and different to some of the other sectors that we speak to here on the show. And then let's take a look at one of those challenges that I know is going to be front of mind for you, and I'm sure for many of your peers as well, and that's incorporating AI responsibly into learning environments. And then, as we always do on the show, we'll try to learn from some of your CXO leadership secrets as well. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. That's our curriculum. That was the word I was hunting for today. That's our curriculum for today. But first, start with the bigger picture for me. You've worked across healthcare, municipal government, now in education. For our listeners who are CXOs in those other industries, financial services, energy, insurance, and whatever else, what's similar in your experience and what's fundamentally different about being a leader, technology leader in the education sector?
Okay, great question. Similarly, we have, there's a technology org in every organization, just like there's a finance org, just like there's an HR org. So the industry doesn't matter so much when you're talking about internal service departments like technology. Because we're nonprofit and we don't produce a product, we're very similar to those kinds of lines of business within organizations. Healthcare, municipal government, the ones that I served in were, I would say, mostly nonprofit. Healthcare, there was some for-profit in there, but the organization had 5 hospitals on site. So there was some cost recovery going on, but mostly nonprofit, a big research and educational university as well. So we had a mix of a lot of things. In municipal government, once again, nonprofit, we're talking about elected leadership. And then finally, school district, again, elected leadership. So these nonprofits with elected leaders are essentially asking the citizens for tax dollars to fund us. And so we have a very large responsibility to discharge our duties with good stewardship, fidelity, integrity, and make sure that every dollar we spend on anything we're doing can be well justified.
Yeah, so certainly a strong through line through those non kind of core education roles that you've had before, but a strong line, public service, non-profit, and so on. You mentioned a moment ago the size, the number of students, customers, I guess. So how do you, I guess, what are the lines that you can draw between serving an educational establishment and, if you were working outside of education, serving a workforce or a customer base?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to, if you're in a private company, you usually have, defined customers that you have a product, you're pursuing a certain kind of profit, you're making and selling something. But for education, what we're selling, if you will, is we're selling an education product to our customers who are students. I mean, you can think of it that way. And by extension, those students and their parents are part of the community. And
Oh,
so our mission is a very serious one. If you think about it in terms of Fort Worth, which is, where I'm at, and we need to grow these students into productive citizens of this community. So you're thinking, college, career, and civic ready. That's what our mission is. We want to make them college, career, civic ready, and we want them all to graduate. And so it's a very serious mission. Also, because they're children, they're not adults, and we have to deal with that very particularly. We can't just send things to them. We have to protect the environment that they are in. A lot of cybersecurity, I know we'll get into that. But that's essentially our customers, are the students, and by extension, their families and community.
yeah, and the teachers as well. But I guess, again, when you're working with an adult or a presumed adult grown-up customer base, you have a different responsibility when it comes to things like security, privacy, protecting their personal information, and protecting them from harm in the various forms of harm, I guess. How does that play into your role then as CTO?
Yeah, so interesting. I'm called a CTO, but really I'm a CIO, which I guess if you care about the difference, it's because we don't produce a technology product here. While there are envisionings, long range planning, we try to differentiate. We want to leverage technology for the advancement of our students, but really it's more of we're providing a resource for staff and students, and so it's really more of a traditional CIO role, but. It's definitely one of those things where we have to understand what the needs are of the students for their educational needs. And so for that, it's a lot of endpoint devices, endpoint
Yeah.
security, managing a very large fleet of those devices, making sure that we can refresh them under a life cycle. And then, as you said, cybersecurity is very important. We have to follow a whole host of regulations. I'm thinking of COPA and FERPA, even HIPAA, actually, because we have
Oh,
nurses,
yeah, of
campuses,
course.
right? And we don't want to have PCI data running on our network. So we have a lot of things that we do at scale, which are similar to what other people do. So I know, other types of entities are dealing with lots of regulation, and so we certainly have those. And I think with the coming of AI, we have more challenges than we used to.
Oh yeah. Well, I want to
Yeah.
land very heavily on AI in a moment, but before that, just picking up on a point that you mentioned there in terms of supporting end user compute. Again, drawing that line back to an organization where the CTO, CIO may be able to dictate to a certain extent, thou shalt use Dell laptops or Apple devices or whatever else. In your environment, you tell me, but I'm guessing you have less control over the end user devices that your customers, your 70,000 or however many users are bringing in. So that must present you with a bit of a challenge as regards to the bring your own device thing that we've been chatting about for the last 15 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. COVID really changed the dynamics of all that. So the bring your own devices, whether you liked it or not, had to change with COVID. And I think no, post COVID, I think we wanted to maintain the momentum that we gained by making sure that every student had a device. So that was sort of a one-to-one device in the hands of every student, which was a big lift for a lot of K-12 environments. Many had not been previously funded to run such a scale of devices. That thrust everybody into the need for such a thing, and so it accelerated curriculum. It's accelerated our a need for money and management and life cycles. But to your point about the devices, we want to support multiple instructional models because, we have special education services, dyslexia, we have all manner of choice programs. One of the ways that in the K-12 industry that you want to differentiate your product, if you will, is that because, there are private schools, there are charter schools. And one of the things we can do because we're so large and we have such a long tradition as a school district, an independent school district, is that we can offer a lot of services that it's very difficult for small charters and privates to offer. And so a great example of that is our sports programs. We can have large football teams. Texas, we're big on football here. Wrestling, football, soccer, all the things, I guess football, the other football, all the things that we that we like to do are difficult to attain unless you come to the large ISD. And so we make sure we offer academic programs that are competitive as well, like Montessori, different kinds of frameworks for instruction, dual language academies. And so as a tech group, we've worked to make sure we're enabling those kinds of choice programs as much as we can. And so that requires a lot of software and hardware that we have to stay on top of.
Yeah, and to that point then, how do you make sure that you are serving the real needs? Because it's very easy for technology to sit in its ivory tower or ivory basement, whatever you want to call it, and to deliver the things that it thinks an organization like an independent schools district might need. But actually, and we see this in conversations with technology leaders across all industries, there is a shrinking between the back office and the front office. And I feel as though now more than ever before, whether it's technology leaders, information security leaders, whatever, feel much closer to their end users in order to deploy services, to deploy protection in a CISO's environment that actually meets the real needs of those end users. So what do you do to make sure that you feel as close to your student body as possible and are able to very, very targetedly deliver things that they want and need?
Yeah, that actually shows a lot of good understanding about what our problems are and what our mission is. So we have what we call a set of pyramid teams. Pyramid, if you think about a pyramid, so you have more elementary schools, you have fewer middle schools, and then you have even fewer high schools. You can think about that progression. And so that's kind of a pyramid. And so we'll have three of those, or zones, whatever you like to call them, where we have technical teams that dispatch technical support personnel to those areas of need when people call out or they put a ticket in and they need help. So we have a service desk. They attempt to first call resolution anything that comes in, password resets. My screen is dark. I can't get the projector to work. They can solve many of those things just right there on the phone so that the teacher doesn't have to disengage the class. And if it doesn't work there, we'll dispatch somebody to come out. 30 minutes, an hour, somebody shows up, and then they continue to fix the problem. And I think that's the way we keep our hand on the pulse of classroom instructional need by making sure that those people are always out in the schools, having conversations with the teachers, having conversations with the administrators. And then, those management personnel work with the rest of leadership to take those needs and those things and operationalize those into either a better support, or we become aware of things maybe we weren't aware of, or when we roll something new out, there's always a period where it has to go live, and then we discover things. And so that team is essential in helping us root out what inefficiencies may exist. But those relationships are very healthy here in our district, those technical teams working with those teachers. And I think that's the key to this.
Before we go into some of the challenges of bringing AI into this environment, just help me to understand your journey a bit. You've been in this role since, I guess, the beginning of the academic year, August 2025. Are there any key moments or experiences earlier on in your career that have shaped your direction or kind of brought you where you are today, would you say?
Yeah, I might answer that really kind of as a surprise in leadership. So I started in a CTO role about 5 years ago in a neighboring district, the direct neighbor, Arlington ISD. So right, heading towards Dallas, right next door, Arlington. I took this role in September, so I've had the benefit of most of this school year. But I would say that the odd thing that I noticed when I started as a CTO was that we're really in the people business. It's very you're thinking technology. You're thinking, of course, you're thinking about your mission to the students. You're thinking about technology solutions. Of course, you have all the back office stuff that you're worried about. Cyber, platform, network. But and in this seat, in this role, it's a people business. It's about forging relationships with your fellow, in K-12 would be cabinet officials, so the other chiefs, the superintendent. It's about forging good relationships with those groups, understanding what their needs are, deconstructing the jargon back into real language, truly understanding the nature of the problem so that you can provide an actual solution, not just a piece of technology. And then I think with my own staff, you discover that it's really much more about cultivating. Everybody will have strengths, and you want to figure out what those are, and you want to cultivate those. And for me, one of the founding, I guess you would call it management principles or concepts, was the multiplier principle. There was a book written called Multipliers. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's a very good book, and it really is essentially it's about how to get the most brilliance out of your employees, and really it comes down to a dialogue. It's understanding what drives them, helping point them back to your mission, being able to leverage their expertise, and then grow their skills. And instead of just sort of here's the task, work on that, you want to grow the skills. And so you'll find that some people are really good at some things that you didn't expect, and then you want to assign them those type of projects. And that was really eye-opening for me to try to go down that journey and leverage the particular skills of personnel, because we are, technology people are knowledge workers, and so we're not like a lot of other staff. And I think essentially technology people work best when they know that leadership cares about what we think. If we have a certain knowledge and expertise about a subject, if it's taken seriously and you try to work with it, you get so much more excellence out of your staff. And that was an epiphany for me.
Maybe this is a dangerous parallel. I don't know. I know you're working in an educational institution. You aren't a teacher, but how you described developing your workforce, listening to them, helping them to be the best that they can be. There's a lot of parallels in how you apply yourself as a leader to develop your talent to that which I am sure many of your staff there do to develop their young people's talents and help to shape their future careers as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Another, perhaps this is just a strange, odd feature, but you may know this. Technology people are often the most resistant to change, and so inside of a K-12 educational environment or any educational environment, you would think, hey, we should know education. I mean, we're educators, right? We should know this. But when it comes to things like change management within technology, or when it comes to teaching, technology staff new things, it's actually quite more difficult than you might imagine. I believe we are perhaps the most resistant to change because technology people invest a lot of time, energy, skills, and money trying to learn a new stack of technology. Say, for example, AI is coming out, right? So it's something new. People don't already have the experience in it. It's moving so fast. People are trying to figure out how to plug in and not waste your time. For example, for a while they were thinking, prompt engineering. If you just learn how to be a prompt engineer, then that's the new level. Well, now AI does their own prompts. You just, hey, give me a prompt for whatever. So it moves so fast, it can be difficult to figure out how to skill up into something new. And another example of that was when virtualization started back in the early 2000s. Everybody wanted to get on board, trying to figure out how to skill up. And so when you get to the end of a technology stack, people, like mainframes. It was very difficult to let go of the mainframes because you had people that put 20, 30 years of skills into that, and it was so hard to learn, okay, we're going to abandon mainframes, we're going to go back to client computing. Well, they would give you 100 reasons why you should not do that, but it didn't change anything. It just, you had to learn it and jump on board. And I think here in K-12, we can leverage our abilities within as educators to do that. And it's funny when you have to take your own medicine sometimes.
Let's come on to AI there, and it's something which I know is front of mind for you, incorporating AI into learning. And of course, I speak with CXOs across a lot of different industries, and they're all grappling with it in their own ways. So talk to me about the challenges that you face in an educational setting, because like you say, it is inevitable. So what do you do with that?
Oh yeah, this is the biggest disruptor we've had in 100 years in education. You might be able to say that for other industries too, but particularly for education. We went through you went through calculators coming out. Oh, we want to use calculators for math, and it's going to ruin everything, and we figured out how to deal with that. And then you had the rise of the internet, and people are going to just go to Google. They're going to Google everything to write their papers with, and we figured out how to get through that. And now we have AI, and I think LLMs are a calculator of human language, and we've not dealt with that before. And so how do we deal with a calculator of human language? And in fact, it's even in the last year, we've gone from calculator of human language to now chainable reasoning models, so that you can give it a set of tasks that it has to reason through and go step by step. And it's remarkable what we're accomplishing. So I think our task in K-12 is how do we utilize it, but then still have kids learning. And everybody's experienced if anybody's got kids, I'll use GPT to write my papers. So I think you have to be creative as educators on how do we flip the classroom. We've got to require the use of AI. Have the students, give them the prompt. Use this prompt, and you can say GPT or whatever tool you like. Use this prompt, and then I want to see what results you get back. And then ask it to go up to the 12th grade level, and then ask it to, give it some refinements for your prompt. They will like the exercise. They'll think it's fun. They'll do it. And they're going to be critically thinking about what they're putting in, about the results they're seeing. Have it use LLMs for fact finding. I mean, quite frankly, that's what we did with calculators. We said, okay, well, the arithmetic and the long division, we don't care about that anymore. What we care about is, do you understand the theory of the mathematics, like how the formula works and how and when you might use it? And so, use the computer to make the numbers easy. We care about, do you know where to put the numbers? Do you know when to put the numbers and in what order? And so I think the same is true for this. Have LLMs do your fact finding, come back to class, and then rewrite your conclusion in class in front of the teacher. And I think, so there are solutions to this. We just have to be smart about it. We have, I know we'll talk about the protection and policy later, but I think that's how we have to adapt to this. It is, like you said, it's not going to go away. We have to embrace it. And one last point about this. We have to embrace it because we're educating students to be our community members in the future. They've got to be able to go into jobs where they can use it. So we owe it to our seniors to be able to leave our educational environments with skills and tools to actually be able to use AI responsibly, that we want them to be great at it. We want to be able to go into a local business already knowing how to, hey, I'll prompt this chain of reasoning and we'll create this app and we'll figure out all these problems because I know how to do it. And our business leaders will love that. So that's our task. That's our job now.
That's beautifully expressed about the how calculators worked their way, probably just before I was born when calculators were new, but I did see microcomputers come into the classroom. But bringing that forward now to AI and LLMs essentially being a sort of calculator for words, I find that beautifully expressed, and clearly a lot of thought has gone into a thoughtful way to bring AI LLMs into the learning environment. With your CTO stroke CIO hat on, though, how do you do this responsibly to make sure that the stuff like security, privacy, all of those guardrails. Shadow AI, of course, is going to be a thing where you work as well. What do you do so that you make sure that it can be used as safely as possible in those learning environments?
Yeah, great. We spend a lot of time on our policy, and there's a concept called digital citizenship, and it's something that we also need to teach students as a form of it's almost like, how do you stay healthy on the internet? Well, digital citizenship will include a lot of things like, even things like, don't have too much screen time. Make sure that you don't give people personal information. And that has to be taught to kids, because otherwise they're just going to share everything to everyone. And so this is also kind of like that. Make sure that that when you're using AI, that you're using it with integrity, and that you're following the parameters of the instructional environment. But then on the tech side, we need to be sure that we have the whole system on guardrails. So for example, we want to have instances where that if our teachers and students are using it, we're using a model and a framework, whether it's Gemini, GPT, or whatever you're using, that it's safe for under 13, that it's a secured instance where teachers can't accidentally release protected student data. It won't go out onto the internet and be used to train models. It stays within our tenant or our environment. And so technology has to be sure we're creating that environment for them to use. And honestly, I think the role of a CTO CIO is one of governance. I think we make sure that we lead the governance conversations with the rest of the leadership in the organization about here's how we think we need to control and secure things. Here's how we think what our responsibilities are, and how we work as partners to facilitate those things.
Finally, on this, there's another dimension here, I think, isn't there? And I'd love to hear your insights that goes beyond the teaching, and it's the kind of social and emotional impact. And you alluded to it earlier. I'm a parent, and I've watched this conversation around how social media has impacted upon young people, and frankly, the adults, not so young people as well, but in ways that we could not have imagined. 15, almost 20 or so years ago now. And right now, this moment we're at right now, it strikes me that we're at another moment where behaviors are again changing as we increasingly interact with AI chatbots. We talk about cognitive offload. Many people are offloading a lot of the work onto AIs, which in a way affects how their brains process that work. So as a technology leader in the education space, how do you feel about this challenge, this potential change in how we are almost wiring our young people to think?
That's a great question. The research that's coming out now is showing us it's helping us understand how broad and difficult the problem is. You mentioned, if you're using AI to provide you answers to questions that you used to Google, there's research right now that shows that, back in the old days, like a year ago, you might put something in Google and you're going to get a list of results, and Google has algorithms, and it's going to attempt to show you things that it thinks are more popularly ranked and whatnot. And you're going to go through and you're going to look at the list of items, and you're going to you're going to decide which one is more relevant. Well, now if you ask AI the question, it produces that list for you. You never see a list. And so it causes people to be less invested. The research is showing people are less invested in the results. And if they're using it to do research or put together a paper or something for work, they tend to remember less about their results and the task itself than they do back in the day when you had to construct it from a Google search. So we're already seeing that happen. So, great question. I think one of a couple of the problems that are emerging for students, particularly, is the issue of. I'll give you three things. One is the issue of bias, and we know what that is. Where because you don't see a list of results, you're gonna say you get one super result from the AI. It's kind of conversational. Here's the answer. Like if you ask a person, well, the AI is going to have all kinds of bias that you may or may not know about. Also, there's the issue of data gravity. data gravity is an odd one because it really means that the AI, this is a question asked so often that there's a consensus in whatever the question is dealing with, whatever the topic is, there's a consensus that has emerged. And so now it's going to suppress any alternative views, or not on purpose. It's not suppressing on purpose. It's just it doesn't deliver a wide set of opinions. It may not be thought provoking enough. It may not be as engaging because you're going to get the consensus opinion. So the gravity is going to get larger and larger, pull more things into the consensus view. And then lastly, I'll say there are some things that kids are chatting with AI avatars and becoming friends with them. And I was at a recent conference, and that was one of the big topics. Is they had interviewed a lot of children, and children will tell you that they see their friends doing this, and they're worried about them. And so social emotional health is like, how do we make sure they're having conversations with their friends and classmates, and not that they're not becoming secluded and only talking to AI? Because remember, all an AI is going to do is tell you what you already think. If you're having a conversation, it's only going to validate your own. It figures out how to validate you. And we want kids to be challenged and have relationships.
It's such an interesting space that you work in, and I find it reassuring, even though I'm not from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I find it reassuring that people in positions like you are having these thoughts about deploying the right technology responsibly, thinking so deeply about the future and enabling our young people to be as wide open in terms of their viewpoints and the technology that they use as they can be before they enter the workforce. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do, and thank you for chatting us through your role and all of the various moving parts that you have going into it. But before we let you go, Eric, there are some questions that we ask all of our guests here. This show's called CXO Secrets. So what is your secret? If you were to put your modesty to one side for a moment, tell me what key attribute you believe has enabled you to do what it is that you do today.
I think I'll go back to the thing about it's a people business. I think we have to treat our, and I'm talking about the staff that works for you. I think you've got to actually care about them. You have to listen to them. You have to try to understand them. I think if you do, you want to always assume positive intent, and you want to give benefit of the doubt. And I think if you really lead that way, you're going to get the best out of your folks. And that, there's often when you're under time pressure, you're under cost pressure, you become transactional. And I think you can't become too transactional. You have to remain a leader of people. And I think that's the key.
We do a Pass the Question here, where guests on the show have an opportunity to put a question to a future guest, whoever they may be. First, we have a question for you from Sarah Letney, CIO at Yorenko, who asks this question.
I would like to know what is the most difficult conversation that they have had to have recently with another member of the C-suite in their organization, where they've had to explain that the thing the person is asking for, which they think is simple, is actually not possible, and how they've gone about doing that.
Okay, yeah. So, I've had a lot of conversations like that. I actually believe this is essentially one of our primary job functions as a CIO, CTO. I think this is part of the value that we add, is we help deconstruct such requests back into reality. You can call it managing expectations. Very often, and maybe K-12 is different than some industries, but what I've seen is the typical conversation like that is, and it happens all the time, so it's hard to even think of one. I mean, there's several a year. I mean, so often it is just unrealistic expectations on how various requests, how long they should take, and perhaps a lack of understanding of the engineering and the cost underneath for that. So, you can imagine complex data request. Hey, I need to know how many teachers that are classified this certain way have this many rosters. absolutely, we can do that. Give us a couple of days for the team to go out and, if it's a custom data request. Sometimes we'll get, you have to also imagine sort of the triangle of cost, time, and quality. So if you have those three sides of a triangle, and I know there's more ways to create, other geometrical units like that, but you sometimes you have to sit down and say, look, we can go faster, but it might increase cost and it might reduce quality. And you really have to have that discussion. And I think trust is required for those conversations. You need to, hopefully your CEO and or your superintendent have created an environment of trust amongst the senior leaders where there's a safety for straight talk and that there's a respect for straight talk. I think that's essential. And I think if you don't have it, then you should definitely try to create that culture that you want. And then I think as a technology leader, you want to frame things in business terms. You want to have, you don't want to use jargon. Our data engineering team is going to have to create these pipelines to, you don't even want to get into that. You want to share the understanding of what the business need is, and just say, look, we can do that. So it's never no. It's a journey to yes, and it's gonna go through different paths. It's gonna wind around a little bit, and so you want to negotiate. Hey, we can. Maybe we can't do it by X week, but we can do it the week later. Or if you would let us reduce the scope, we'll have it done by your deadline. Or if we can spend some money on contractors, we'll throw some contractors at it and get it done. So I think you try to negotiate. That's part of our job. And I think that that trust and for those conversations is needed. Absolutely.
Understanding that iron triangle, and you mentioned it there, the key role of a CIO, CTO, CXO really, as a translator, being able to translate between whether it's the numbers and the technology or whatever it is and the business, and being that bridge, that translator between the two. Very well expressed, Eric. What question would you like me to put to a guest on a future episode of the show?
Yeah, I think, so I've thought about this. I've wanted to ask people this question. Okay, the capabilities of AI have greatly eroded junior roles in all of our organizations. Because senior leaders are often able to have AI perform a task, maybe researching, things that might have been researched have been given to junior associates and rising leaders that that you might be mentoring, and they'll go hunt those down. And so I guess my question is, how are CXOs dealing with this issue, and how are they planning to invest resources in hiring and mentoring junior roles going forward? I'm concerned about that. We need to create more seniors, and they have to come from juniors. And so I wonder how CXOs are dealing with that.
Great question, Eric. I look forward to asking that. Make sure that you hear the response as well, because I think that's a question we'd all like to know the answer to. Eric Upchurch, thank you very much for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you very much.